Live.
Good evening. It's our honor and privilege to welcome you to the weekly BW Dialogue. BW Business World is a lot about business economy, but it is a lot also about ideology, about the political economy, about the thoughts that shape India, because you cannot take out economy and feel that it can exist in isolation. Today we are talking to a special guest. He's very well known. He doesn't really need an introduction. But to set the context, let me introduce Sri Ram Madhavji. He's also called Varanasi Ram Madhavji. He's an Indian politician. And today we are talking to him because he's written a very provocative, very interesting book called The Hinduvata Paradigm. So let me welcome Mr. Ram Madhav and formally introduce him. Mr. Ram Madhav was born on 22nd August 1964. He is an Indian politician who has served as the National General Secretary of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He was also a member of the National Executive of the Rashtriya Samswayak Sangh, and he's authored multiple books. His latest is Hinduvata Paradigm, which we are going to discuss today. And on the back of that book, we'll have a conversation with him. We'll have a dialogue with him. He's also written Uneasy Neighbors, India and China after 50 years of the war. I can go on talking about him. He was born in Varanasi. That's why he's also called Varanasi Ram Madhav. But he was born in Amalapuram in Andhra Pradesh. Sorry, I stand corrected. You were born in Amalapuram in Andhra Pradesh. And he did his education at the University of Mysore, and he was born in the East Godavari district of Andhra Pradesh. He's a student of engineering. He earned his diploma in electrical engineering from Andhra Pradesh. He also has a postgraduate degree in political science from the University of Mysore, Karnataka. And his association with the RSS started as a teenager. So I can go on. He volunteered to be a full-time worker for the RSS in 1981. He was assigned to several key positions in the organization. He's also been associated editor of the Jagriti, a Telugu weekly. He also was the editor of the Bharatiya Pragna, a monthly magazine in English published by the Pragna Bharati. He has worked for the RSS as a journalist for more than 2 decades. I can go on. Basically, he's somebody who understands Bharat kya hai, India kya hai, but is also somebody I won't call you an intellectual because you're a doer. You're not just an intellectual. You make a difference. But he's somebody who's learned it. And he also serves as a member of the Board of Governors of the Venerable India Foundation. He's also a member of the Vision India Foundation. And today we welcome him in the context of his latest book, The Hinduvata Paradigm. Joining me are my 2 editorial colleagues, Ms. Urvi Shrivastava and Ms. Vasudha Mukherjee. First of all, welcome, Mr. Ram Madhav. Thank you for joining this BW Dialogue. Let me start by asking you, the last 18 months have been very different for all of us. How have the last 18 months for you, both personally and professionally, and what has kept you busy?
Let me at the outset thank the Business World editorial team, including you and your 2 colleagues who are present here, for giving me this opportunity to spend some time at the mercy of 3 of you, maybe to discuss a little bit more about my new book. But about the last 18 months, it was a calamitous period for not just we in India, but the people of the entire world. But the good thing is, as far as our country is concerned, we have had our challenges. We have had very distressing periods in the last 1.5 years due to this COVID pandemic. But we have also achieved something spectacular. As we talk today, India has been able to administer 1 billion vaccine doses to its eligible population. That doesn't mean the job is complete. We all know that we need to administer 2 doses. That means a lot of work is still pending. But for a country of India's size to achieve it in about 7-8 months' time, when many developed countries, including America, are struggling to convince their own populations about vaccines. We all know that how much vaccine hesitancy is there in developed countries like America. In such a scenario, when developed nations are also struggling, here are we able to reach to the last man and administer these vaccines to him. I consider it a great success for this government, of course, the medical infrastructure establishment, of course, but also lots of NGOs have done a stupendous job right during the entire COVID period, but also in this vaccination drive. But most importantly, I give credit to the people. I mean, they trusted the government, they trusted the vaccine, they trusted the efficacy of them, and they came forward. Whether we are literate or illiterate, that never mattered. So I think it's a very happy thing today, although we had our unfortunate deaths of hundreds of thousands of people and all that. Today, at least, we are able to secure our population through vaccination.
Absolutely, Mr. Ram Madhav. It was a mixed bag, but yesterday India celebrated 1 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses with song and dance. And I hope the BBC and CNN, which during April, May, and June did very negative coverage of India, are able to also, being a journalist and an editor-in-chief of a respected product, I respect their editorial policy, but I hope they have balance and they also notice this very significant milestone, especially looking in the context of what's happening in Europe and America. So I hope, because they did very aggressive coverage showing all the weaknesses of India, and it's okay. The kind of prime minister and the kind of government we have, we will take the weaknesses and see what we've done in the last 5 months as a nation. So I hope BBC and CNN, which were, I felt that were at the forefront of a campaign against India, not just reporting. Yes, we could have done better as a society and a country. I'm not denying that. But I hope they take up notice that we've administered 1 million doses, and hopefully every Indian over the next few months will be doubly vaccinated and hopefully have a booster shot. But now let me come back to your book. Now let me start by asking you, why this book? Why this book now?
Yes, it's a very important question to ask. I thank you for putting that question. Why this book in the first place? Today, generally, Deen Dayal Upadhyay's integral humanism or integral humanist philosophy is a relatively lesser known entity for people, not only in India, not only outside India, but even within our country. But he was one philosopher of the 20th century, the past century, who had articulated a very, very important, very significant socio-political philosophy. Now, in the last century, if there was any one socio-political philosophy that India could offer to the rest of the world, it was Gandhiji's Ahimsa and Satyagraha, non-violence and truthful resistance. Gandhiji championed it both in India, but as a principle globally. The result was that, post India's independence, many countries in the world turned to his principle in their struggle for freedom. All freedom-loving people, majority of them, turned to non-violent and peaceful means, taking inspiration from Gandhi. But apart from Gandhi's this very, very solid contribution to socio-political thought of the world, Deen Dayal Upadhyay also tried to give an important socio-political idea to the world. I'm using the words like philosophy, thought, idea. I'm not using the word ideology for an important reason, that India, if you look at its 2000 year or 5000 year history, in this long history of its existence, it has never propagated any ideologies per se. India has not produced a Karl Marx or a John Stuart Mill. It has produced philosophers. Those philosophers gave ideas, right from Adi Shankara to Buddha to Mahavira, to take the contemporary philosophers like Aurobindo or Vivekananda. They were all philosophers articulating noble ideas and leaving the world to, offering those ideas to the world, asking them to build their own models. We were not ideologues in that sense. Then they are also, like Gandhi, belong to that category of philosophers who had given a broad idea about what one can learn from India's civilizational experience when it comes to socio-political institutions, socio-political establishment of the country post the independence. So that way, this idea is a very important idea. But it could have been adopted at the time of independence, which we did not do. At the time of independence, we rather preferred to go for the then popular, then prevalent Eurocentric ideas. I have nothing against them because those ideas have served our country for last 7 decades very well. In fact, we have built our entire socio-political establishment edifice on the Eurocentric ideas, the ideas that have the origin in European thought. Probably we have implemented them better than the European countries today, whether it is democracy or it is secularism or it is other social ideas or about the very idea of creating a nation here and all that. But at the same time, there are equally noble, equally profound, ideas that India has championed in many centuries. We could have also turned to them. We had not done it in 47, but in 21st century, when the whole world is passing through a new transition post the COVID, we are into a new world order today. In that transitioning world, probably it is time to turn to some of those ideas. But please remember, I'm not prescribing any blueprint or any model. That's not India's culture. We only give ideas. Based on those ideas, you have to probably reform the existing institutions or build the new ones. That is the purpose with which I tried to interpret Deendayal Upadhyaya's integral humanist philosophy, which we all follow in Sangh Parivar. That's why I gave the title also as Hindutva Paradigm. It's essentially about integral humanist philosophy.
Thank you so much. And, let me address it from another angle. I keep saying we are in a 3C economy. A contactless, we are doing this conversation in a contactless way. A collaborative, you and me and 2 of my colleagues are collaborative. And most important, compassion, karuna. And, when I read the book, the integral humanistic approach that Sri Deendayal Upadhyaya ji espoused and what you brought in the book made me think of compassion, because compassion is at the center of human relations and human interactions. Now, let me ask you, there are multiple chapters in the book. Which is your favorite chapter in the book and why? It's like somebody who has 2 or 3 children, who's your favorite child? It's a difficult question.
No, essentially, I mean, as an author, I should only say that the entire book is very dear to me. But having said it, there are certain chapters. For example, the chapter on the question of identity. How do we ultimately define ourselves? There's a chapter where we consider that very identity, if there is any ideology to which we subscribe, it's about that identity, the very cultural identity of this nation. I feel that's an important chapter to turn to, look at, and from it come out questions like, then how do you look at the multicultural setting or a multi-religious setting of our country? How do you then handle those multiple religions, and how do you handle questions of identity of different religions and all that? I've tried to address those issues in that one chapter. The second chapter that is very dear to me is the chapter on democracy. The general perception about us, when I say I'm an RSS BJP man, a general perception about us in CNN and BBC that you referred to, I have nothing against them, like you also. I don't have
neither do I. But at the same time,
like you also, you don't have anything against them per se. But
I feel that they are sometimes very blind to the good things in India, while they can report some things that can be better. I feel they're harsh. Overall, I believe the foreign media is very harsh on India and does selective reporting. That's what I believe. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Absolutely. But they have a perception about our movement as though it is akin to the fascist movements of Europe of the 1930s and 40s. They brand us as a fascist organization, etc., etc. But if you look at Deendayalji's writings, he was a quintessential Democrat. He insisted that democracy is the only available best model for governance for a country like India. But he also insisted that when you adopt democracy for a country like India, it has to be something different. It cannot be the same majoritarian model that Europe or some of the Western countries practice. So he insisted that Indian democracy should have consensus as the basis. How do you build that consensus? Building consensus should be the important aspect of Indian democracy. Indian democracy cannot be a majoritarian democracy. These are his words. He says that in India, consultation should become the democratic model. He and Gandhi both say that for them, democracy means the weakest also has the same power as the strongest. No, some of these ideas that they articulated, I feel that chapter again is very important, very revealing for many of those who do not know us closely. The two other chapters which I like are the last two chapters. One is on human rights. Again, there's a lot of misconception about us, about our thinking and our philosophy, but how much we are committed to protecting or upholding human rights, and not just we, but traditionally, this country, its traditions, its culture, how they are very much in support of upholding the fundamental rights or natural rights of the humans. That also is an important chapter. And the last chapter, for a change, is about womanhood in our whole entire Indian thinking. That also throws a lot of light. In that also, I highlighted that while feminism of the Western variety was needed for those countries, in India we had a totally different tradition. It was also freedom to women tradition, but of a different kind, different variety. That also is a very dear chapter to me. I think these 4-5 chapters are significantly important in the entire book of 15 chapters.
And I would recommend this book to all, because, at the end of the day, our cultural ethos also, you cannot be two different economies. If you have a cultural economy, then it leads to a business economy. And, I will say it's a book that every business CEO should read, because it's about history, it's about our values, and it's the where that our values, we don't need preaching from other countries of the world in terms of how we need to have our moral compass. So I would say it's a very important book, and it comes at a very important time, as the book focuses on some key aspects like nationalism, communism, and the like. And it, in some way, even in a 21st century paradigm, makes it relevant. So I want to ask you, as you already said, that the book, while you talked of many political luminaries, the book focuses primarily on Deendal Upadhyay ji. I want to ask you, how does the idea of a nation state has evolved over the last 25 years, which I primarily mean from the 20th century to the 21st century, because in the book, you try and make that distinction and detailing. So give us, how has the idea of a nation state evolved in the last 25 years, especially going on from the 20th century into the 21st century?
Oh, yes, sure. Before I answer that, just one more sentence I want to add. There is a big chapter on economy also, because
Yes,
Business World
I
is an
have.
economy magazine. So I must say that what are the economic ideas of India right from the beginning? We are we are very liberal when it comes to economic ideas are concerned, but we only insisted that the ultimate aim of any economic model should be not even maximum benefit to maximum number, but full happiness to all people. Now, this may sound like a very idealistic or a very hyperbolic statement. No, but our insistence has always been, when we say sarvepi sukhinas santu, etc., sarvepi, everybody should feel happy and everybody should enjoy the goods in life. So any economic model that you develop should aim at giving happiness to the last man on the street. Dindalji called it Antyodaya, and Gandhiji and others called it in a different way. But coming to that important question of nation state and all, my thesis in this, my argument in this book has been that nation state per se is a very European construct in the last 200 years. Nation states came into existence only in the last couple of 100 years in Europe and subsequently in the West. And of course, then they created Africa. How they created also, I wrote about that creation of African states in my book. in India, nation and state are treated as two entirely separate entities. Nation is a feeling, is a sentiment, is a spirit. State is one institution of the nation. In India, traditionally, there was never, in the entire history, there was never one state. We all know that when we became independent, there were 560 different kingdoms in this country. So as a state, India was never one until we created one state guided by the constitution. It's a great document we have. By that document, we created one unitary state for the entire population of our country. But state and nation are separate. When there was no single state in India, India was ruled by 500 kings. Was there no nation here? Were we not Indians then? Were we not Bharatiya then? Since you raised that issue, I must take you for 1 minute to what a very interesting debate happened in the Constituent Assembly when we were making the Constitution. Sometime in the end of 1948, Ambedkar presented the first draft of the Constitution to Constituent Assembly. In that, in the preamble, what we see today, the preamble, we, the people of India, that's how the draft also began. Some people in the Constituent Assembly, some leaders, objected to it, saying that you are aping the American Constitution, which also begins with we, the people of the United States of America. Why not say that we, the nation of India, instead of saying we, the people of India? Because the problem is, in Indian Constitution, we have not called India a nation at all. You can check the Constitution today. In the preamble, we called it people of India. In Article 1, we defined India as a union of states. So some members said, first of all, call ourselves a nation, we the nation of India. Ambedkar makes a very important point. He says, look, it's all very fanciful to say that we are a nation, etc., etc. Where is the national consciousness in India? We are divided on castes. And those two are on hierarchical caste system. Somebody is upper caste, somebody is lower caste, these divisions. We are divided on religious lines. So in India, we need to create a nation now. For that, we are creating this state. So we now build a nation. So that phrase that we often come across, nation making, started from that whole discourse. So we have to build a nation here. But we believe that yes, what Ambedkar highlighted at the time was a fact. We lacked in national consciousness. We were divided on various lines. But India has been a nation for millennia. So I suggested that we should look at nation differently and state differently. And when it comes to state, in India, state always played a limited role. You are into business or economic journalism. You appreciate it much more than anybody else. Do you want a state that is omnipresent everywhere? Or you want a state that has a very small, limited role? Indian ethos has been that you will have a shrunk state, small polity. Most of the things will be handled by society by itself. Businesses, they will run on their own. Minimum intervention from the state. That has been the tradition. Kings used to fight in India all the time. They used to fight with foreign aggressors. If there was no foreign aggressor, they would fight amongst themselves. They will pick up some quarrel with a neighboring king and they will fight. But society never fought. Because kingdoms, ruling class was not the center of Indian society. Our trade used to go on. Our social life used to go on. So state and nation in India used to be separate. We followed the European model of nation state after the independence, not to complain because it has delivered us so many things. We have been able to stitch a good, strong, united nation here. But that point remains that today, state is omnipresent. It's all encompassing. Right from my childhood to my business to my politics, everywhere there is state's intervention. That should change, as Prime Minister repeatedly says. Minimum, government and maximum governance should be the way forward, but that is the Indian way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ram Madhav. I'll ask my last question I have a set of other questions, but I'll let Urvi and Vasudha ask the next set of questions. But give us from the chapter on the economic ideas to create the new India, For our viewers, for our readers, why don't you talk about what's in that chapter?
Oh, it's a very elaborate chapter. Obviously, it will be difficult for me to go into detail, but briefly I can say that Indian tradition, as I mentioned, has been about securing happiness to people. But happiness has been the objective of all economies, all economic ideals, all economic principles, whether it was capitalism or communism. Everybody talked about it, but their whole approach was, for communism, it was based on a conflict, haves and have-nots. In the case of capitalism, the emphasis was that maximum number should get maximum benefits. In India, the approach has been that no, here the effort should be to bring happiness to everybody, the last man. So that's why in our system, we also encouraged individual purushartha, individual enterprise, individual endeavor. State should stay away, allow for individual enterprise to grow. In fact, traditionally we said one should earn with shata sahasra bhava, in a million hands. I mean, when I say million hands, one should not remember a corrupt politician, not through corrupt means, but through purushartha, through righteous means. So the whole idea that if somebody is rich, he should be looting the country, that's not Indian approach. We are not against somebody's prosperity, but those who are capable of building their economy, are becoming rich, should be able to pass on the fruits of their prosperity to those who cannot afford it or who cannot achieve it. So that is where we also brought in, like Gandhi used to, trusteeship. Although every big company today follows trusteeship, everybody has a trust or something to share their profits. That has been the Indian tradition right from the beginning. Second important aspect, but that's the last thing I've said, otherwise this chapter is quite big. The second thing is, India always believed in Atmanirbharata, which even Honorable Prime Minister talks about. We must understand Atmanirbharata doesn't mean shutting off from all sides from the rest of the world. No. Atmanirbharata is to turn to everybody, but only to ensure that I stand on my own feet, I become rich, I become prosperous, I contribute to the national wealth. Today, what is happening is, in our country, if you look at our macro GDP figures, we are the 6th or 7th largest economy in the world. But look at the per capita, we are 152nd. Because some people are creating wealth, but millions and millions have no contribution whatsoever to country's economy. They are at the most consumers. And even the jobs that we are creating today are not to demean anybody, but Swiggy and Zomato jobs. Those jobs don't create purchasing power. Those jobs don't create wealth at the grassroots. You have to develop economic models that create wealth at the grassroots. So, at least you should like China. China today is not, although it's a very rich country, prosperous country, it's still a middle class country. But are we still a middle class country? We are miles away even to create a totally middle class country. So our effort should be to create grassroots prosperity. That is what Atmanirbharta means. Some people misinterpret as though we should shun foreign companies, foreign capital and all that. No.
It's about capability building.
Bring all that to enhance your capability. I think these are very fundamental ideas that India always espoused and stood for.
Thank you, Mr. Ram Madhav. I could go on talking, but let me first bring in Ms. Urvi Shrivastava to ask you a few questions, followed by Ms. Vasudha Mukherjee. And they were possibly, they're millennials in the true sense. Vasudha has been educated abroad, and Urvi, again, has grown up in a family that is full of achievers and who contributed to India and are contributing to India. They're very bright, and I can definitely say that they're always prepared, and your conversation with them will be even more stimulating than what I have done with you. So first Urvi, then Vasudha, Mr. Ram Madhav.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Dr. Batra. So, Mr. Madhav, I would like to ask you that the later half of your book focuses on topics like Ram Mandir and Hindutva, which have historically been very controversial. By historically, I mean the recent history, say the last 30 years. However, you have presented these issues as a unifying factor. This intrigues me a lot because how can we see something which has been a source of communal violence in India, a source of integration and secularism?
First of all, if one goes through that chapter, I have essentially clarified that aspect only, like how you feel. There are many who feel that these issues are divisive issues. But on the contrary, these issues are the ones that connect the people to their thousands of years of history. What we always insisted was that for creating a united society, united country, the basis cannot be the contemporary politics alone. Contemporary politics has not, it's unfortunate, has not resulted in creating a unified society. On the contrary, politics has left us much more divided. But these issues have the potential if only they are, propagated, they are, they are taken to the people in right spirit by all sides, the proponents as well as those opponents. If both take them in their right spirit, what is the message from those things? If only we understand them correctly, they can become lasting unifiers of this country. But I must draw your attention to one small thing. This whole idea that as though communal violence or communal divisions in our country began with Ram Janmabhoomi, it's actually a lack of understanding of our history. In India, this whole communal division dates back to 18th, 19th century itself. We have always been fighting among ourselves on religious lines. Look at Gandhiji's whole effort. Throughout his life, he always advocated for Hindu-Muslim unity. He never used Hindu in any separate sense also. I mean, sometimes, he always used it in the context of unifying Hindu-Muslim. Otherwise, his whole vocabulary used to be about India, about its oneness and all that. But throughout, he was branded as a Sanatani Hindu, Kattar Hindu. Congress was continuously branded as a Hindu party. See, this all because of certain propaganda, certain, certain wrong understanding about this country's history of its religions, history of its social life. That needs to be put to an end for us to achieve a lasting peace, lasting unity. These issues that I highlighted are only from that point of view, not to, further enhance the divisions, nor to put each community against one community against the other. That's the whole purpose behind, trying to explain the spirit behind those movements. I agree with you that there are a lot of misunderstandings about those movements.
Yes, sir. Indeed, the communal violence has a long history. I think it started around 1857 onwards by the British, which is a topic for another day. That's a very interesting take that somebody is using these kind of issues and introducing the idea of communal harmony. So with that positive thought, I'll bring my colleague, Ms. Vasudha Mukherjee, to ask you the next question.
Thank you, Urvi. And thank you, Madhavji. Thank you so much for joining us today at this dialogue. This book was very interesting to go through. It's definitely a very heavy book, a very big book, I would say, because it covers so many aspects. And right now, you just said, we were talking about lasting peace, lasting unity. And I actually want to go back a little bit because there was we used so many wonderful quotes in there. But the one that really stuck out to me was the one by Leon Trotsky, where he said, anyone desiring a quiet life has done badly to be born in the 20th century, which I think absolutely perfectly sums up the human condition right now. But I want to just go back and ask a very basic question. Like, when you were writing this book, who was your target audience? Like, who were you writing for? Who were you hoping would pick up the book and read it and be inspired by it?
Okay, firstly, millennials like you all, firstly. because this country's future, I mean, I'm not saying this as a patronizing thing. I'm saying this as a reality that this country's future ought to be in the hands of the millennials. I always say this publicly. Countries like United States of America, when Barack Obama became the president of that world's most powerful country, he was just 47. Medvedev became the president of Russia. He was just 42. Countries, most powerful countries, I mean, so is the case with many other European powers today. You will find presidents, prime ministers in the age group of between 40 and 60. So sooner than later, India also will be placed in the hands of our younger generation. They need to understand that, what happened in India post the independence was, number one, we are so much steeped in European ideas and all. I'm not at all saying they are bad. I'm not a Eurosceptic. In fact, in my book, I've quoted so many European scholars and academics in support of my arguments, not against them. So I'm not an anti-Europe person, and my subtitle also says non-Western worldview. It's not anti-Western worldview. But having said it, we got so much immersed in those ideas that we refuse to acknowledge primarily that there can be something very useful in our own civilizational history that we can probably learn from and then try and apply for this century. First of all, we all how to do that. That's one objective for me. Secondly, there is a vast campaign of calumny, misunderstanding, sometimes deliberate distortions and all that goes on about our movement basically. But in the process, the whole country gets besmirched. So I wanted those Westerners, those Europeans who want to dismantle Hindutva. There was a big campaign in Western universities to dismantle it. So I wanted to tell them that, okay, before you want to dismantle it, first of all, understand what is it all about? What are the nuts and bolts of it? Then only you can dismantle it. So the second objective of this book is to reach out to those sections which have lots of misunderstandings or apprehensions about Hindutva or Hindu nationalist movement or integral humanism, the indulgent, all that. These are the twin objectives with which I have written this book.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And thank you for being so specific with your language. It's something I especially appreciate, saying non-Western as opposed to anti-Western, saying ideas as opposed to ideologies, really clearing out the differences between that. I think that is something that makes ideas and concepts and philosophy that much clearer, and it definitely made it easier for me to follow the storyline. Urvi will ask the next question. Back to you, Urvi.
Thank you. Mr. Madhav, since we are talking about non-Western and not anti-Western philosophies, the idea of dharma comes to my mind, which is something the book discusses at length. So I wanted to ask you, when we talk about modern day India, how does this Buddhist concept apply when we use it in our social and democratic order?
Not just Buddhist. Buddhist idea is not dharma per se. It is dhamma, they call it.
Yes.
And dharma word is used in Sikhism. Dharma word is, of course, used in various strands of Hinduism. There is no such thing called Hinduism per se. There are multiple religions. Dr. Radhakrishnan used to call it as commonwealth of religions. Different religious traditions are there within Hinduism. So they all use the word dharma. See, dharma is a set of values as against the Western general approach towards morals. If you look at the Western theological discourse, you come across the word morals very often. And so much so that we today talk about Victorian morality. What is Victorian morality? Which, unfortunately had its major influence over Indian society in the last 200 years. But it was a very orthodox, very in a way very anti-human rights, anti-fundamental rights morality. It was given the camouflage of morality, but it was actually in the name of morality suppressing lots of fundamental rights of women, fundamental rights of uneducated people, fundamental rights of aborigines and all that. Whereas in India, there was never any major discourse about morals per se. Our discourse is always about values. Since you are two young women in this, let me share one interesting perspective with you. In Indian culture, we have a tradition of calling 10 important women, epic personalities as Mahasatvis. Mahasatvi means they are greatest ideal women. But if you read the history of all 10 of them, each one of them had at some point or at some level revolted against the existing system. Somebody revolted against husband, somebody revolted against family, somebody revolted against even Yamadharmaraj. Somebody went about experimenting with her sexuality. Kunti got a child before she was married. She did it as an experiment. She was given a boon. She wanted to try it out. Did we call her a fallen woman? Did we insist on morality? We said no. Values are important. India's value discourse is a much higher discourse than West's morals alone discourse. I'm not at all saying one should be immoral. Please don't mistake me. I'm saying there is a value discourse. Dharma symbolizes that value discourse. Value means how do you look at your fellow human being? How do you look at your nature? How do you look at your environment? How do you look at the whole concept of God? There are certain values. So our Dharma discourse is based on that. That is why in our system, even Raja, the king, cannot be above the values, above this Dharma. He has to follow these values. Not just king, our scriptures say even gods cannot be devoid of these values, this Dharma. So it's an all-encompassing value system, certain noble values espoused by Indian saints and seers and scholars, but they are universal in nature. Any country, every country can accept them, follow them. That is the whole Dharma discourse in our country.
While you were having this conversation, a quote came to my mind that well-behaved women seldom make history. It's by Laurel Thatcher, again, not an Indian person. So, of course, we can improvise and apply it domestically as well. So, Vasudha, over to you. I would like you to ask the next question.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that you brought up this story about women, because that's actually the first chapter I was drawn to, because I didn't expect it. I didn't expect there to be a section about that in your book. And it was pleasantly surprising to see that. And I don't think a lot of people will expect to see that. So that's why I would like you to elaborate on that more, because we already had this discussion, as my colleague mentioned, that, there's those ideas, there's the philosophy, and then there's history that is written and that plays out a certain way. And, the Hindutva ideas are always, different from what we have been brought up with. So can you please talk a little bit more about that final chapter? What made you want to add that? And what are some points that you absolutely want to, highlight with that one section of your book?
Look, it's actually a book that deals with various dimensions of the Hindutva discourse, essentially, or India's ancient cultural discourse, and how you interpret it to the present times. How do you look at it? How do you understand and derive messages from it? In that context, the last chapter deals with women and womanhood. The issue is there is a feminist movement in the West, which some of us, some in India also believe that we need to bring probably to India also. I have nothing against that need for a feminist movement in the West per se. Whether the route they took was right or not was for them to decide. It's their challenge. They are facing it. They will decide. Indians are very fond of value judgments. I don't want to do that. But I do acknowledge that there was a historical need for them to raise their voice. And I discussed that need at length in this book. In this chapter. Yeah. But if you talk about India, historically, Indian civilizational experience when it comes to women and womanhood is concerned was totally different from how we understand it today. The medieval behavior of our society towards half of its population has been not in tune with the traditional understanding of womanhood in our country. We cite Sita, we cite Draupadi, we cite Savitri as goddesses, etc., etc. But if you look at the context or the way they conducted themselves in their own, milieu, in their own setting, it's actually a big revealing thing for all of us. You have a personality like Sita who is always presented only in the form of Pativrata. Fair enough. That's an important quality that woman should have probably, but then a man should have Pativrata also. I mean, these are all complementary things. These are not separate things. But here is the woman. If you read original Valmiki Ramayana, she chastises Ram like anything when he asks her to undergo the fire test. She says, am I talking to an enlightened man? She asks him. And at some point, when he asks her to come back after that whole Love Kush episode and all, he refuses to come back. She says, no, I go where I have respect. So these are the kind of personalities we dealt with. Draupadi was such a fiercely independent woman. But we did not denounce her. But instead, to safeguard her honor, the entire war was waged, entire battle was waged. So the way we dealt with the question of women in our country has been lost by us also in the last few hundred years. And when we today talk about security, safety of women, we only talk about the laws. Laws are very important. I mentioned it. But with best of the laws in place also, can you ensure that women will be safe? What I suggested was, in India, the whole effort right from the beginning has been about dignity, not just safety. Safety is one aspect. Definitely it needs to be taken care, but you need to give dignity. If you want to give dignity to women, you need to train men first, not women. So these are some of the issues we need to boldly take on. I mean, for me saying on your show all these things, probably I may get a lot of criticism also. I am open to that. Let there be criticism. But you need to address some of these questions very boldly today. We today create separate schools at the very primary, secondary school level. They are creating gender-specific schools. You need to look back and ask, is this the right way? Creating gender separation right at the primary level. So some of these questions need to be addressed in order for us to change the mindset of the people. India's biggest problem is its mindset. The mindset needs to undergo a major change. That is the intention with which I wrote that chapter. Slightly controversial, I know that.
No, I actually like the way you spoke about that chapter, because you did talk about, again, the Western ideologies, and right, the feminist movement is different, and right now it is evolving a lot, and different groups have different fights that they need to do. We talk about how in the Western like Christianity, they always blame the women as for the original sin, or Pandora for opening the box, but in Indian mythology, we don't really have any such stories, like you mentioned yourself. There's been generally very strong women. So the fight is perhaps same, but also has its own nuances that we need to recognize. And in general, I think that's one of the biggest points in your book, right? That India as a country, while we can take ideas from elsewhere, we still need to recognize our own individual characteristics that make us unique and make our fight unique and different. I will pass over to Urvi to ask her final question before I wrap up with mine.
Okay, Mr. Madhav, since we're talking about ideologies, I wanted to ask you that Gandhiism has been the backbone even of our constitution. Like, let's say we look at our directive principles of state policies and some other laws as well. So how do you think we are able to incorporate it in our contemporary laws, notwithstanding the 73rd and 74th Amendment or the formation of Niti Aayog or anything which is not come across in the last 5 years? How are we incorporating it in modern law framing, given that it is supposed to be a guiding lamp for our lawmakers?
Okay, honestly speaking, Gandhi was totally missing in our constitution making. Not as a complaint, I'm saying this, but the fact of the matter is, in fact, T. Prakasham in the Constituent Assembly stands up and makes a very poignant point. He says, what are we doing? Where is Gandhi in it? Because when the first draft was made, it was made on the basis of 8-10 constitutions that included countries like Ireland, I mean, tiny countries, Ireland, Australia, Canada, USA, and of course the conventions of UK. But there was no reference to India's experience. You talked about jurisprudence. Right from Chanakya's time, so much has been written about lawmaking in India, state making in India, the statecraft, all these things. But none of it found any expression in the initial making of the constitution. So the constitution suffered, if it has suffered from anything, suffered from one thing, that it did not or could not provide enough space for original Indian ideas to shape up our institutions. One of them was this important thing that you were referring to. Gandhi's whole passion, obsession, you call it, was about Gram Swaraj. I mean, rural empowerment. It did not find a place in the initial constitution because Ambedkar was very categorical that we should build a unitary constitution. We should build a unitary state. Indian constitution does not even mention federal word. We are not a federal constitution. Although we keep talking about federalism, we are not a federal. We are a unitary constitution with certain powers delegated to states. But Gandhi's view was that unitary is fine. Unitary, those days everybody wanted unitary form of government, but government should be small. Most of the functions should be delegated to lower units. That did not happen. It took another 40, 50 years for us to bring, what you mentioned as 73rd, 74th Amendment, the Panchayat Raj Amendment. Now, Panchayat Raj Amendment is a very interesting thing. Through that, you claimed to have implemented Gandhiji's idea, but Gandhiji's idea was about giving powers to villages. 73rd, 74th Amendment does not give powers, it only gives money. I was in a village in Tripura. I found a lot of cattle tied in newly built toilets. I asked them, "Yaar, what are you doing? Toilets were built for you under Swachh Bharat campaign. You are tying your cattle there." The village had told me, "Sir, we have been asking our DC Saab, Collector Saab, for last 2 years. We needed a cow shed in our village. We wanted him money. He is not granting us money. So we thought, what can we do? We use these toilets because for toilet we have other facility here. The village needs a cow shed. You are giving them a toilet." Not that toilets are not needed. You have a fundamental problem with your approach. So it may look revolutionary today if I say that, or it's very romantic today if I say that. But if in India, if only what Prime Minister repeatedly says, minimum government, if only we strive for that, if only politicians give up on their obsession to control everything in our lives. Today a school teacher to be appointed in a village without the MLA's consent, it cannot happen. A constable's appointment without a leader's consent, it won't happen. If only that changes, if only society is allowed to handle many more things, then that very Indian ethos will come into picture. You are young, but I can tell you as somebody who is above middle age, I've seen in my own village the canal. If you want to build a bridge, we never turn to the DC or MLA or MP. The village rich man, the jamindar, would contribute and build that bridge across the canal. We never depended on government. That is India originally. But you now take pride in making people more and more dependent on India, thinking that is the right way. But as Prime Minister repeatedly says, in India, you need minimum government so that you can have maximum governance. That is what Gandhiji and even then they are always insisted. I think that is the way to go about.
When you're talking about building bridges and other constructions on your own, that is taking Atmanirbharta or self-sufficiency to the next level, which I don't even know whether that was the agenda or not. So with that, I'll pass over the meeting to Vasudha to ask the final question of the day and wind up our discussion.
Great. Thank you, Urbi. I have two questions to ask you. First of all, after writing this book, what have you learned through this experience?
Oh, this book is still very new. And as you also pointed out, it's a bit bulky. So I don't think I will have any quick feedback about this book immediately. But definitely, I don't even intend I didn't even intend it to be any light reading book that you can read at the airport or in a flight and all that. It needs people to seriously apply their mind. As I said, with the two objectives I wrote this, let the youngsters of this country, first of all, try and ponder over it and see whether there are a few things that we can pick up. You know, another very interesting obsession that many of our youngsters have is, it is all okay, this is all dry philosophy. Where is the model? No, model giving is never our idea. Models you have to build. And you don't have to build one model for the whole country. This one model for whole country, it's not applicable to us. We are a diverse country. But certain ideals, certain direction should be clear. I hope this helps giving people some idea about the direction that we can probably take. In any case, I'm a very optimist as we enter the post-COVID world order. Next 10 years, if we can take care of some of these issues, like for example, firstly, national unity on the basis of our cultural oneness. If we can strive towards that. Secondly, we can create national prosperity in this sense, not the macro GDP figures, but the prosperity at the grassroots. If we succeed in creating that. And number three, if you create a strong economy and a strong, basically a country that can safeguard the interests of its people, its territory and all that, then India will have a chance to play a very important role in the world in 10 years from now. This is a 10-year window. I hope the youngsters of this country, the people who are involved in building this nation, realize that this 10 years is crucial. If we fail to do that, if we remain like this after 10 years also, then we will be missing one more opportunity. Countries don't die, they remain. We will remain as a country, but we lose a great opportunity. So I hope that this book triggers some of those ideas, some of those debates. That's all one can expect when one writes book. Nobody should expect that this book will revolutionize, my book will revolutionize the world. It doesn't work that way. But
you never know.
Some good ideas.
We still talk about Marx and his one book, so you never know.
No harm. I mean, even Marx says, in my book ends with a quote from Marx. Yeah. What is written on his grave? Philosophers only interpret, certain realities. There is a need for implementing them. That's what Marx writes. So the generation takes up the responsibility of implementing them. Maybe there will be definitely some use of this book. I can only share one good news with you. It was released on the 4th of this month. In 15 days or less than 20 days time, I'm told that the first edition has completely exhausted and they are going for the second print. That means there is some interest about this book. I'm happy about that.
Congratulations. And I think you are right that we are a very restless sort of generation, and we're more like, tell us what to do, so we can act and we can do. But it's good to kind of stop and also read about why we are doing what we're doing. What are the ideas that led us to where we are? And I know you are many things, but today you are here as an author primarily. And this is a question I'd like to ask all the authors to come on our platform before they leave. And that is, what is your favorite book and what are you reading right now?
Yeah, I cannot just talk about any one book as my favorite book. Right now, I'm trying to focus on the Western concept of liberalism. I'm trying to understand its its origin, how it has evolved. For youngsters like you, just for your own sake of understanding, these European ideas are not monolithic. There is no one liberalism. There are 16 types of liberalism in the world. Similarly, there is no one secularism. There are variety of secularisms. French secularism is rejection of religion. American secularism is respect to religion. In America, president takes oath by putting his hand on Bible. So European ideas have various facets of it. I am now in the process of trying to understand the liberalism aspect of it. I have studied a lot about democracy in the last 2 years. COVID also has helped me. So I have taken a few courses from some universities, including some universities in China, which have offered wonderful courses. So Australian universities offered courses. So right now my focus is on studying more about the Western idea of liberalism and how, as a society, India has always espoused a very, very liberal worldview. That's where I'm focusing now.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you to our audience and all those who registered and came to watch this live. Thank you for being here. Anyone who wants to go back and rewatch this and think you have missed something, you can do that on BW Business World. We're on all social media platforms, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course, businessworld.in. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I hope you have a great day, a great week ahead of you with all the festivities coming up. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.